Welcome to the Wanderer's Tales. Thank you for being here. Discover powerful love stories that cross borders, cultures, and fate. When you're done watching, subscribe, tap the notification bell, and share. Thank you. Thank you. The sun rose lazily over the rolling hills of the valley, painting the earth in shades of gold and amber that seemed almost sacred. In the small village of Okalamba, life was measured by seasons, community, and the weight of tradition. Yet, in one humble household, there was a quiet defiance that set it apart. His father, a man of unwavering faith, had once been offered the kingship of their valley, a position of prestige that many would kill to inherit, but he had refused. "You do not serve a people by abandoning your conscience," he had said to his young son, whose wide eyes had reflected a mixture of admiration and confusion. That choice had left the family materially poor, yet rich in dignity, teaching him early that the world was not measured by wealth, but by principles, integrity, and faithfulness to one's own convictions. The boy, whose mind always seemed to wander ahead of his years, often wandered the valley paths, thinking not of crowns or wealth, but the puzzles of life and how one might solve them through intelligence and careful thought. He had learned to see the world differently, through the lens of justice, service, and quiet observation, absorbing the rhythm of the village, the market trader's shouts, the women's rhythmic laughter, the old men's debates under the acacia trees, as lessons in human nature and character. Yet, even in the simplicity of the valley, childhood desires crept in unnoticed. The boy was not particularly athletic, often shy in group games or roughhouse activities, but his brilliance shone in unexpected ways. Numbers fascinated him, ideas enthralled him, and stories of distant lands ignited dreams that the villagers could hardly imagine. From a young age, he had learned the value of patience and observation, honing his mind on scholarship and thoughtfulness, while others focused on immediate rewards. His father's decisions, his mother's quiet support, and the strong sense of purpose in his household had instilled in him a sense of responsibility uncommon in boys his age. Even as children ran past him, he calculated trajectories, patterns, and outcomes in his head, like a chess master planning moves on an invisible board. And though the wealth of others tempted him with momentary envy, he recognized early that power without principles was empty, and success without conscience hollow. In the evenings, after chores and schoolwork, he would sit under the open sky, gazing at the stars, imagining what lay beyond the valley, and wondering whether the luck his father had spoken of would ever come to a boy born with nothing but faith, sharp mind, and a heart that refused to compromise. High school in Okalamba was both a window to the world and a cage of expectations. The boy, now growing taller and more thoughtful, navigated classrooms filled with chatter, gossip, and the occasional scuffle, always slightly apart from the crowd. While his peers obsessed over sports victories and local reputations, he measured himself by intellect, curiosity, and subtle accomplishments that went unnoticed by most. Mathematics fascinated him, history enthralled him, and science offered portals to unimaginable possibilities. Yet, amid this academic cocoon, there existed a quiet fascination that distracted him in ways his equations and experiments could not solve. She, the girl who walked past him with confident strides, whose laughter filled the corridors like sunlight breaking through clouds, captivated him from the first moment he truly noticed her. She moved with an elegance and charm that contrasted sharply with the rough-and-tumble nature of their surroundings, and he found himself inventing reasons to cross paths, to see her smile, to catch a glimpse of her world. But it was not merely her beauty that enthralled him. It was her audacity, her independence, the way she dared to dream differently, even in a community that demanded conformity. While he had his calculations and books, she had the vibrancy of life, and in her presence he felt the strange stirrings of longing, ambition, and something more profound that he could not yet name. Despite his infatuation, he remained cautious, respectful, and reserved. The girl had other priorities, other desires that drew her toward parties, social gatherings, and a world of uplift beyond the boundaries of the small village. She pursued excitement, attention, and the allure of city lights in a way that he had never considered. Yet, every time he glimpsed her walking with friends, the sway of her hair, the glint in her eyes, he felt an inexplicable certainty that luck, destiny, or perhaps some unseen force had tied their fates together. In the quiet of classrooms, or under the shade of the old acacia tree where he studied after lessons, he imagined conversations that never happened, moments that might be stolen in the hush of early morning or after the final bell. He studied her patterns, her laughter, her expressions, not as a stalker, but as a boy learning the intricacies of human emotion, of connection, and of hope. And as he scribbled notes in his worn notebooks, solving equations and dissecting sentences, he allowed himself a secret, that if fortune favored him, somehow, years from now, their paths would converge in ways that neither he nor she could yet foresee. These early days of high school, with their mix of longing, learning, and quiet observation, were shaping not only his intellect, but his heart, planting seeds of patience, persistence, and unspoken devotion that would grow into forces powerful enough to alter the trajectory of both their lives. The winds of change often arrive quietly, like whispers through the trees, but for him, that quiet would mark the beginning of a life-altering journey. It was during the latter part of high school, just as the rhythm of exams and homework had begun to weigh heavily on him, that a member of his father's church noticed the quiet brilliance that the world around him often overlooked. Pastor Cube, a tall, deliberate man with a voice that carried authority without aggression, had observed him helping younger students, staying after school to tutor others, and solving complex problems with ease. One afternoon, under the low light of the church veranda, Pastor Cube approached him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder, and spoke words that would reverberate through the years. Your mind, your heart, and your faith are gifts, but they must be used. Opportunities exist, even far from here, where those gifts can be recognized. I know someone who can help. The boy, normally reserved, felt a spark of something he had rarely experienced: hope. Pastor Cube explained that a group of foreign investors had come to the village for a COVID vaccine outreach program and were offering small scholarships to talented students who could demonstrate both intellect and moral integrity. The opportunity, though modest, was monumental for someone with little means. For the first time, he realized that the world beyond the valley was not just a distant dream. It was attainable, if only he dared to step forward. Securing the scholarship required preparation, persistence, and a careful balance of humility and self-confidence. He spent nights under the dim light of his small lamp, filling forms with precision, writing essays that spoke of faith, resilience, and his vision for the future. The village buzzed with curiosity and gentle skepticism, wondering why a boy from a poor household would be chosen over those with connections or wealth. Yet, it was not connections but character, intelligence, and quiet perseverance that set him apart. As the days passed, he felt a growing sense of anticipation, and with it, a bittersweet ache. He thought of her, the girl who had captured his attention since the first days of high school, and imagined how his departure would create distance, physical and emotional, between them. Still, he was driven by the knowledge that the path laid before him could change everything, not only for himself, but for the family and community he sought to honor. That first taste of recognition, that first validation outside the walls of home and school, awakened in him a hunger for growth, an understanding that luck was intertwined with effort, and that the smallest encouragement, given at the right time, could set a life on a trajectory beyond imagination. As he walked back home through the dusty paths of Okalamba, the wind carried the scent of rain yet to come, and he felt for the first time that the valley, though beautiful, would soon become only a memory, a starting point for a journey he could hardly yet envision. By the time the scholarship process was underway, he found himself increasingly aware of the pull of the girl who had occupied his thoughts for years. High school corridors, once merely spaces of study and chatter, now seemed charged with her presence, as though the very walls knew of the quiet longing he harbored. Every shared glance, every accidental brush of hands during group activities sent ripples of anticipation through him, but she remained elusive, caught up in the whirl of her own world, friends, parties, and the pursuit of attention that he had little part in. He remembered, vividly, a particular afternoon under the sprawling shade of the mango tree near the school playground. She had laughed at something insignificant, and he had, almost impulsively, told her, "You're lucky, and luck will take you places." Her smile had been warm, teasing, yet fleeting, and her words in response, gentle yet firm, had left him unsettled. "You are a very lucky boy, too." That moment, small yet resonant, etched itself into his memory. It was not a confession, nor an invitation, but an acknowledgment of his presence in her world, and it became the seed that quietly fueled his persistence, a reminder that some connections, however fragile, could carry profound significance across years and distance. Despite this subtle encouragement, she remained distant, unattainable in her own way. Every attempt he made to draw closer, an offer to help with studies, a question about her favorite books, even small acts of kindness, was met with polite avoidance or gentle deflection. She had her priorities, the thrill of city life after school, the independence she fiercely guarded, and the allure of youthful indulgences that he could neither offer nor understand fully. Yet, he did not falter. There was a resilience in him, cultivated by years of observing his father's moral fortitude and by navigating the subtle complexities of a community that prized tradition over innovation. He understood that love was not always immediate, that admiration and devotion often required patience and quiet endurance. As he continued to watch her from a respectful distance, he began to recognize patterns, what made her laugh, what drew her attention, and the moments when she let her guard down. He cataloged these silently, as one might study the stars, recognizing constellations in her expressions and actions. That high school year became a careful dance of proximity and restraint, hope and humility, a period where longing intertwined with self-discipline. In the background of exams, church duties, and family expectations, he nurtured a secret certainty that one day, somehow, paths would converge in a way that mattered, and that the girl who so effortlessly commanded his attention might also recognize, in him, a presence worthy of her trust and admiration. The day he left Okalamba was quiet, almost surreal. The dusty roads and familiar voices, the laughter of neighbors and the scent of the valley air, all seemed to hold their breath as he walked away with his small suitcase and dreams heavier than any luggage he had ever carried. His father's hand on his shoulder felt both comforting and heavy with expectation. The weight of principle, faith, and generational responsibility pressed down on him. It was not a burden, but a compass. Boarding the bus to the city where he would catch a flight abroad, he looked back at the village that had shaped him, the streets he had walked countless times, the small chapel where Pastor and Cube's encouragement had altered the course of his life. And somewhere between the pulse of excitement and the ache of departure, his thoughts, as always, wandered to her, the girl who had become the quiet heartbeat of his youth. He wondered what she would think, whether she would notice his absence, and if the tiny seed of connection they had planted would ever flourish across the miles that now separated them. In the city, life moved faster, louder, and more complex than anything he had known. The airport buzzed with travelers, luggage trolleys, and the murmur of multiple languages, a stark contrast to the calm cadence of Okalamba. Meanwhile, she navigated her own world, working at the airport and carving a life that revolved around independence, excitement, and fleeting pleasures. They no longer crossed paths, though he tried, sending messages that went unanswered and letters that were never returned. The distance was both literal and symbolic, a chasm that seemed to grow with every unrequited attempt at connection. Yet, he held on to a quiet resolve. The values instilled in him by his father and community, perseverance, integrity, and patient effort, were now his shield against disappointment. Every decision, every choice, became a step on a journey he could not fully see, but one he trusted would eventually lead to a convergence he had long imagined in the quiet moments under the valley sun. Arriving in the United States for university was like stepping into another universe. The cityscape, towering buildings, and endless streams of people were overwhelming, yet exhilarating. He quickly distinguished himself academically, his brilliance shining in lecture halls, laboratories, and libraries alike. While his peers pursued social validation, sports, or casual indulgences, he poured himself into studies, coding exercises, and the development of ideas that often left professors astonished. Yet, amid the intensity of new life, memories of her lingered, a bittersweet constant that reminded him of home and the threads of connection he had not yet severed. Attempts to reconnect via email and phone calls failed, each unanswered message only deepening the sense that she had moved on, and yet he remained quietly steadfast, convinced that some bonds, no matter how long dormant, could still awaken when the time was right. University life also introduced him to a network of mentors, peers, and potential collaborators. In lecture halls, cafes, and study rooms, he discovered opportunities that merged intellect with practical application, every challenge a chance to test the limits of his mind. But at night, when the city lights reflected off the windows of his dorm, he would allow himself a brief escape into memory. The sunlit schoolyard, her laughter drifting on the wind, and the fleeting moments that had quietly shaped his desires and ambitions. Those memories fueled a drive that was as much about proving his worth to the world as it was about honoring the quiet promise of youth, the belief that luck, destiny, and effort were intertwined, and that he would one day return, not merely as a boy who had left a village behind, but as a man whose achievements and integrity could finally bridge the chasm between past and present. It was during a quiet afternoon in the university library that inspiration struck, almost imperceptibly at first. He recalled a conversation with a girl, long ago, about a small idea, something fleeting, casual, yet brilliantly simple in concept. At the time, it seemed nothing more than a passing thought. But now, in the prism of experience and technical skill, it became the seed of an idea with potential to transform lives. He began to sketch algorithms, develop frameworks, and write code with meticulous care. Every line reflected years of learning, patience, and the underlying principle instilled by his father. Work with integrity, think ahead, and create solutions that honor both mind and heart. Slowly, a tangible product began to emerge, a sophisticated application that could revolutionize a niche industry. The work consumed him, blending sleepless nights with bursts of inspiration, all the while anchored by memories of her suggestion. What had once seemed like a casual comment had evolved into the blueprint of his future, and for the first time in years, he felt that the universe had conspired in small, deliberate ways to align his talents with opportunity. As the app matured, he tested it rigorously, refining features, predicting user behavior, and consulting mentors who marveled at the ingenuity of the concept. It was not mere ambition that drove him, but a combination of intellect, persistence, and a subtle desire to honor the unspoken connection with her, the girl whose idea had planted the spark that now threatened to ignite a career-defining flame. By the time he prepared a pitch to potential investors, he understood that this was more than technology. It was proof that careful observation, integrity, and attention to the smallest inspirations could transform life trajectories. The app was ready, and he knew that its success would not only change his future, but validate the patient, quiet years he had devoted to skill, perseverance, and a belief that luck and effort were inseparable companions on the road to achievement. The day the app sold was surreal, almost dreamlike in its magnitude. The numbers scrolled across his screen like an abstraction at first, $363 million, but their reality quickly grounded him in a mixture of disbelief and awe. The investors were impressed, not just by the technical brilliance of the app, but by the methodical, principled way he had approached every stage of its development. Yet, despite the staggering sum now transferred to his accounts, he did not change. He remained modest, attending church services, volunteering, and continuing charity work that had long defined his character. His wealth, immense as it was, became a tool for purpose rather than status, a means to effect change rather than to indulge vanity. In his quiet apartment overlooking the city skyline, he reflected on the years of preparation, the scholarships, the distant longing for a girl who had shaped his earliest ambitions, and the subtle, often unseen forces of providence that had carried him to this point. The money, remarkable as it was, felt secondary to the realization that perseverance, intellect, and integrity had produced tangible results that now enabled him to give back in ways both meaningful and transformative. Simultaneously, new opportunities arose in the realm of international business and philanthropy. Partnerships with Arab oil magnates opened avenues for charitable initiatives, including programs aimed at rehabilitating prisoners, providing educational resources, and facilitating societal reintegration. The work was deliberate, requiring travel, negotiation, and a level of subtle diplomacy that suited him perfectly. Yet, throughout all of it, he carried the quiet pulse of memory, the girl, the valley, the small gestures of high school days, and allowed them to guide the moral compass of his decisions. Each act of charity, each initiative became a statement not of wealth, but of purpose. He had learned, in the crucible of experience, that true success was measured not by fortune alone, but by the lives touched, the principles upheld, and the integrity preserved amidst the allure of immense power. And, as the city lights shimmered beneath him, he felt a quiet certainty that the next chapter of his life, personal and professional, would demand courage, faith, and perhaps a reconciliation with the past he had never truly forgotten. Arriving in Windhoek, Namibia, felt like stepping into a painting that combined both serenity and vibrancy. The city shimmered under the late afternoon sun, streets glistening from a recent rain, and air filled with the earthy scent of wet soil mingling with the aroma of local street food. He had come for the prison rehabilitation mission alongside his Arab business partners, an initiative blending charity with social responsibility. His days were filled with meetings, logistics planning, and visits to correctional facilities, providing educational resources, literature, and emotional support to inmates. The contrast between his bustling philanthropic efforts and the rhythmic, almost meditative calm of Namibian life offered him a perspective he had never fully appreciated. The evenings, especially after rain, became a time of reflection. Streetlights cast golden halos over cobblestone streets, and the distant laughter of children playing in puddles reminded him that human resilience, even in hardship, was a constant theme of his life. Yet, amid the mission, his thoughts occasionally wandered to other aspects of life, the kind that could not be measured by productivity or success. He considered the people he had helped, the cities he had visited, and the unspoken connections he had yet to reconcile. And then, on a particularly quiet evening, the universe delivered a moment that would forever alter the course of his heart. As he strolled along a rain-slicked avenue, his coat slightly damp, the world seemed to pause. There, walking toward him with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort, was a woman whose beauty struck him like lightning. Her hair, damp from the rain, glistened under the street lamps. Her eyes held a sparkle that seemed familiar yet impossible to place. She moved with a fluid grace, oblivious to the world yet impossible to ignore. For reasons he could not explain, his heart recognized her, even before his mind could. In that fleeting moment, he felt the stirrings of something long dormant, a connection neither time nor distance had been able to sever. The sight of her lingered in his mind long after she disappeared around a corner, her presence etching itself like an indelible mark. He had never been easily swayed by appearances, but this encounter stirred something primordial, something that defied reason. Every detail was magnified, the curve of her jaw, the rhythm of her steps, the laughter she released into the cool night air. He had seen many remarkable women in his life, admired many from afar, but the impact she had on him was different. It was visceral, immediate, and unnerving in its intensity. He found himself pacing the streets, hoping for another glimpse, analyzing the chance of crossing paths again as if life had reduced itself to a series of probabilities. That night, in his quiet hotel room overlooking the city, He replayed the moment over and over, realizing that this encounter was the spark that had been missing in years of focused solitude and philanthropy. He had no name, no prior connection, and yet an inexplicable pull toward this stranger who somehow mirrored memories he had tucked away deep in his heart. By the next day, he could not shake the feeling that destiny was at work. He immersed himself in the mission, visiting more facilities, interacting with inmates, and organizing resources, but his mind kept wandering to her. Every street, every corner of the city seemed to hold the possibility of her return, each encounter imagined with vivid clarity. It was an obsession of curiosity, tempered by restraint. He did not know her, yet something within told him that their lives were meant to intersect. He recalled his old memories of high school, the girl whose laugh and presence had captivated him for years, and for a fleeting, disconcerting moment, wondered if this stranger was somehow connected to that past. The world felt suddenly expansive, full of possibility, and yet focused entirely on a single thread, finding her again, understanding why her presence had shaken something long dormant in his life. Days passed, and the memory of the woman weighed heavily on his mind. He had rehearsed what he might say should fate bring them together again. Each word carefully considered, each gesture imagined for maximum authenticity. And then, almost miraculously, their paths crossed once more at a small cafe he had taken refuge in after a day of mission work. She sat alone, reading a book, and he hesitated, heart pounding, before summoning the courage to approach. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Her eyes lifted, and in that instant, he froze, the same spark, the same energy, yet tempered by years of experience and resilience. He offered a simple greeting, and she responded politely, her voice lilting, warm yet cautious. What was intended as a casual encounter slowly unfolded into a conversation that stretched hours, covering books, the city, and fleeting observations of life. He noticed, almost painfully, the resemblance to someone he had known long ago, and realized that the familiarity he felt was rooted not in recognition, but in the echo of a memory long cherished. As they spoke, he maintained the careful balance of honesty and subtle curiosity, keeping his immense wealth and success entirely hidden. For him, the initial approach was purely personal. She reminded him of the girl who had captured his adolescent heart, and that was reason enough. Each laugh, each shared observation, pulled them closer, yet both remained aware of boundaries. By the end of their first extended conversation, they had built a fragile, delicate bridge of trust. He walked away that evening with a sense of cautious optimism, aware that this connection, however new, had the potential to alter the trajectory of his life. The simplicity of sharing space with someone whose presence stirred deep-seated memories reaffirmed his belief that destiny often worked quietly, through moments unnoticed by the world but monumental in their significance. Over the following weeks, their meetings became frequent and increasingly intimate. Casual coffee breaks, long walks along rain-dampened streets, and shared laughter in quiet corners of the city allowed them to explore facets of each other that words alone could not reveal. For him, the connection deepened beyond mere attraction. She became a window into a world he had long idealized, a world that mingled vitality, resilience, and grace in ways that resonated with both his heart and his intellect. They discovered shared values in small gestures, an alignment of humor, and the subtle cadence of thought that allowed conversation to flow effortlessly. And yet, he remained entirely cautious, holding back truths of wealth and the life he had built, choosing instead to focus on the immediate joy of companionship, the unspoken thrill of rediscovery, and the quiet echo of a past memory that had never faded. She, on her part, began to appreciate the presence of someone attentive, thoughtful, and grounded, qualities she had rarely encountered in the whirlwind of her own life. In his company, she found a calm that contrasted sharply with the unpredictability of her past years. Their friendship became a space where they could simply exist without pretense, a rarity in a world full of agendas and assumptions. Slowly, the line between friendship and something more began to blur, though both were cautious, recognizing the delicacy of new beginnings. Every shared laugh, thoughtful gesture, and meaningful conversation became a thread in a tapestry being woven, one that neither fully understood, yet both felt compelled to explore. The city, with its bustling streets and rain-washed avenues, became the backdrop to a connection that felt destined, mysterious, and achingly fragile all at once. It was during one of their long walks that he began to perceive the depth of her experiences, the layers that hid beneath her composed exterior. She spoke, hesitantly at first, of her life in the city, the work she had done quietly for years, and the reason she had come to Namibia. The revelation astonished him. She had been navigating the complexities of a legal and social system, moving through networks of influence and bureaucracy in an effort to secure the release of her sister, who had been imprisoned under circumstances beyond her control. Each detail she shared, every nuance of her struggle, deepened his respect and admiration, revealing resilience, resourcefulness, and a quiet courage that few possessed. It became clear that the woman before him was not only a reflection of past memories, but an individual forged by experiences that demanded strength and unwavering determination. He found himself drawn to her not only for her beauty or her resemblance to a memory long cherished, but for the substance of character that had allowed her to persist through hardship and continue striving toward justice. Her story opened a new dimension of their connection, layering friendship with empathy, admiration, and unspoken desire. He began to see the world through her eyes, witnessing both the subtle indignities and quiet triumphs that marked her daily existence. This new awareness intensified his protective instincts, his desire to contribute not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a genuine partner in thought, action, and moral support. For the first time in years, he felt the intersection of memory and reality, past and present, aligning in ways that seemed orchestrated yet profoundly intimate. In the shared silence, the walks, and the careful attention to each other's words, a bond formed that transcended circumstance, hinting at a future shaped not solely by chance or fortune, but by deliberate choice, empathy, and mutual recognition of strength and vulnerability. With time, the barriers between them began to dissolve, revealing layers of intimacy that were both emotional and intellectual. Late-night conversations over coffee, walks in secluded city parks, and quiet moments watching the sun set over the city skyline allowed him to understand her fears, ambitions, and enduring hope. He listened without judgment, offering perspective, encouragement, and a steady presence that contrasted with the turbulence of her past. In turn, she began to trust him, revealing vulnerabilities that few had ever witnessed. It was a slow, deliberate process, connection forged not through passion alone, but through patience, respect, and shared understanding. Every moment together deepened his awareness of her character, her resilience, and the remarkable grace with which she navigated a world that had not always been kind. He found himself increasingly conscious of the paradox. The very woman who reminded him of a memory long cherished was, in truth, a living, breathing force whose experiences and decisions shaped the narrative of her own life. This awareness intensified his emotions, blurring the line between admiration, affection, and the beginnings of love. The city became their shared stage, a backdrop against which trust, curiosity, and subtle desire played out in everyday encounters. With each interaction, each shared smile, and each thoughtful gesture, they became increasingly entwined, forming a bond that was as much about emotional resonance as it was about mutual respect. The slow build of intimacy, grounded in authenticity and patience, set the stage for transformations neither fully anticipated but both felt stirring beneath the surface of ordinary days. Their collaboration on the rehabilitation mission brought them even closer, merging purpose with personal connection in ways that seemed both natural and inevitable. Working together, They coordinated visits to facilities, organized educational programs, and ensured that resources reached those most in need. Through these shared responsibilities, he witnessed her resourcefulness, her empathy, and her unwavering commitment to justice and humanity. They celebrated small victories, the release of an inmate into a supportive program, the delivery of long-awaited books and supplies, and took quiet satisfaction in knowing that their combined efforts were making tangible differences. In the process, the boundaries between professional partnership and personal intimacy blurred, as moments of laughter, concern, and shared responsibility wove a complex tapestry of connection that neither could ignore. Outside of work, their lives intertwined in subtle, meaningful ways. Evening walks after long days, shared meals in small cafes, and conversations stretching into the night created a rhythm both comforting and exhilarating. He observed how she approached the world with determination and grace, while she began to rely on his insight, calm presence, and steady companionship. The slow fusion of personal and professional life allowed them to see each other fully, beyond appearances, rumors, or past judgments. What began as a fleeting resemblance to a cherished memory had evolved into a profound, living connection, one that combined admiration, respect, and a quiet, unspoken affection, setting the stage for revelations and transformations yet to come. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the Namibian city skyline, they sat together on a quiet rooftop, the hum of distant traffic fading into the background. The air was filled with a gentle warmth, a serenity that allowed truths long held in silence to rise to the surface. He found himself reflecting on the years that had passed, the scholarships, the distant city, the countless nights he had imagined a future that might include her. Slowly, cautiously, he began to share pieces of himself. His memories of high school, the admiration that had grown into a quiet longing, and the dreams that had sustained him through years of separation. He did not speak of his wealth, for it seemed irrelevant. What mattered was the sincerity of connection, the bridge between past and present, and the recognition of the bond that had formed between them. She listened, her eyes attentive, her expressions a mixture of curiosity and recognition, as though sensing the depth of emotion behind every word. It was a moment suspended in time, where vulnerability and honesty intertwined, and the weight of unspoken possibilities hung in the air, delicate yet profoundly significant. She, in turn, allowed fragments of her life to emerge from the shadows, revealing struggles and fears that she had long carried in solitude. Stories of personal losses, the obstacles she had navigated in pursuit of her goals, and her cautious approach to relationships painted a portrait of resilience tempered by experience. As they shared these intimacies, a subtle shift occurred, a recognition that their connection was no longer superficial or casual, but rooted in empathy, shared understanding, and emotional resonance. The gentle laughter that accompanied their stories, the quiet gestures of support, and the lingering glances formed a language of their own, one that transcended words yet communicated volumes. In the fading light, they sat side by side, aware that this emotional closeness had changed the dynamic irrevocably, intertwining hearts and minds in a way neither had fully anticipated but both silently embraced. The revelation came gradually, with the subtlety of a slowly rising tide. One afternoon, as they organized educational materials for the prison rehabilitation mission, she casually mentioned details of her heritage and the reasons behind her extended stay in Namibia. He listened intently, piecing together the narrative of her life, the struggles to free her sister, the constant navigation of legal and societal barriers, and the quiet perseverance that had marked her every action. The depth of her commitment astonished him, painting a picture of courage, resilience, and selflessness that deepened his admiration. Each revelation added layers to his understanding of her, transforming what had initially been a familiar echo of the past into a fully realized, extraordinary individual whose experiences demanded respect and empathy. In learning her story, he began to see the complexity of her life, the sacrifices she had made, and the quiet determination that had sustained her through years of challenges. As the pieces of her journey fell into place, he experienced a mixture of awe and astonishment. The realization that she had been working tirelessly, often invisibly, to achieve a profoundly personal goal reshaped his perspective. It was no longer just about the resemblance to a cherished memory. It was about the living, breathing woman before him, whose strength and perseverance demanded recognition. His admiration, which had been quietly simmering, now ignited with a sense of protective concern and deep emotional investment. For the first time, he fully appreciated the scope of her courage and the magnitude of the obstacle she had faced, realizing that his growing feelings were intertwined not only with memory and attraction, but also with genuine respect, empathy, and the desire to support her in tangible, meaningful ways. The truth arrived with a subtle shock that altered the trajectory of his understanding. One afternoon, as they were preparing materials for distribution to the rehabilitation centers, it was revealed that she was, in fact, the twin sister of the girl he had known in high school. The resemblance that had drawn him initially was no mere coincidence. It was literal, a reflection of genetics and shared history. He paused, processing the revelation, a mixture of disbelief and awe stirring within him. This new dimension reframed every memory, every moment of attraction, and every subtle recognition he had felt in her presence. The connection he had initially pursued out of nostalgia and longing now assumed an additional depth, bridging past and present in a profoundly personal way. Every laugh, glance, and shared thought now carried the weight of dual identity, reinforcing the extraordinary complexity of their encounter. The twin revelation did more than surprise him. It challenged the assumptions he had carried for years. It forced him to re-examine the motivations behind his feelings and the precise origins of the emotional pull that had driven him toward her. What had started as a memory, a reflection of adolescent admiration, now intertwined with present reality in ways both thrilling and disorienting. The realization prompted a renewed sense of attentiveness, a desire to understand fully the circumstances that had led her to Namibia, and a heightened appreciation for the perseverance that had marked her twin sister's journey. The duality of identity created a layered narrative that demanded careful navigation, emotional intelligence, and patience, setting the stage for an inevitable confrontation with circumstances yet to be revealed. The crescendo of events arrived suddenly, unexpectedly, like a clap of thunder on a quiet day. The twin sister, the one imprisoned whom she had labored to free, rushed to him, eyes wide, urgency and relief etched across her face. In her hands was a small slip of paper, the pregnancy result, that immediately commanded his attention. Time seemed to dilate as he processed the moment, the weight of responsibility, curiosity, and astonishment converging in an instant of suspended reality. He could see the mixture of hope, fear, and determination in her expression, each element underscoring the profound gravity of the revelation. The world around them, the city, the streets, the muted hum of life, faded into a backdrop for this singular moment, a pivot upon which the narrative of all involved teetered precariously. Every instinct, every emotion he had cultivated over years of study, philanthropy, and personal discipline converged into a single point of awareness: the life-altering significance of the paper she held. Questions, possibilities, and the enormity of consequence collided in his mind, leaving him frozen yet acutely present. He felt the convergence of past, memory, and present responsibility, the echo of a high school crush entwined with the reality of the twin sister's life, her struggles, and her trust in him. There was no immediate answer, no clarity, only a suspended moment of profound intensity, anticipation, and unresolved consequence. The story halted precisely at this intersection, charged with suspense, emotion, and the gravity of a future unknown, leaving every reader poised on the precipice of revelation, yet unable to descend further. In the quiet aftermath, the streets of Windhoek seemed to hold their breath alongside him. Every thought, Every possible scenario and every emotional thread converged into a singular realization. The moment demanded reflection, decision, and courage, yet none were immediately forthcoming. He remained rooted, staring at the slip of paper, the twin sisters' expression, and the quiet gravity of events that had unfolded over days, weeks, and years. It was a pause, not a conclusion, a junction at which past memories, present reality, and future uncertainties intersected with a precision that left him suspended in a complex web of anticipation. The city, with its rain-washed avenues and soft evening glow, became a witness to the unresolved, an observer of the fragile, precarious human drama that was unfolding in its midst. No resolution emerged, no answers were provided, and yet every heartbeat echoed the magnitude of what had occurred. Questions remained suspended. What would the future hold for him, for the twin, for the family whose lives had intertwined across continents and decades? The narrative, rich in memory, longing, and connection, left all characters poised on the threshold of decision, action, and consequence. And there, in the soft twilight of an African city, the story concluded, not with certainty, but with the tension of potential, leaving readers to dwell in the liminal space between revelation and resolution, where every emotion, memory, and possibility remain alive, unspoken, and achingly unresolved.